I had a brother, and we were both bullied in high school. And, that kind of running down the back alley, trying to get away from the bullies that are throwing rocks at you every day after school, that kind of nonsense. Day after day, it kind of piles up and it kind of sucks. And it got to a point where he committed suicide because of the bullying. That was when I was in high school. And then shortly after that, I joined the military. I chose the infantry because I felt it was going to be the hardest. Basically, I was trying to choose the hardest trajectory in front of me at every single step. I've got wicked imposter syndrome, man. And I think I've got like 110% imposter syndrome. And so a lot of the things that I do that drives me is based on the idea that I feel like, not that I'm not good enough. It's not that. I just feel that there's always more to give. There's always more to do. I'm not satisfied with mediocrity. The moment that you get a little medal hung around your neck and you're champion of the world or whatever, champion of the international, intergalactic sphere of awesomeness, if you win that position, whatever, like I have zero interest in the moment. I'm already thinking what's next. They focus on the areas that they're really good at, and they never leave that genre. They stay in the game of the game that they're good at, rather than challenging themselves to get into something that they are absolutely terrible at. And that's why I always encourage everyone to, whatever, man. You did what in the past? Big deal. Impress me today by tying on a white belt in something new. And it doesn't have to be a martial art. It just has to be something new that you suck at. I'm not satisfied with being good at something. It satisfies me to find my mediocrity at something and then improve upon that. Earning a trophy today is far more important than the earned trophy from 15 years ago. Those things are memories. You're responsible to create new memories that are trophy moments. Anything worth having takes a long time. Anything that comes too easy is not worth my time. If it doesn't come with a sting, I'm not interested. For me, anything of note has consequence, takes a while, and at the end of it, I'll look back and think, wow. As you get older, you'll start to realize that wisdom is the real currency rather than how many things you've got on your corkboard. The reflection of life, the lessons that you're trying to seek in life for yourself should also be sought for others so that you can pass it along as a service, preferably for free.
What would be the experience that comes to mind where you found failure? Like you sought it out and you pushed yourself to the extreme.
The Patina'd podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd podcast.
All right, so welcome to another episode of the Patina'd podcast. Today I have with me Shaun Taylor. And Shaun, so I'm going to go over this introduction of you, which is generally like a list of accomplishments, which doesn't really encapsulate the man. So as I go through this, though, I'm like, my inner like inferiority complex is like, well, maybe I missed the mark here, because a lot of my show is finding the normal person that does extraordinary things. And I'm not sure you fit into that. I'm not like, as I look at all of your accomplishments, I know your humility will say you do, but so let's see what the viewers maybe think. And you're going to probably impress upon us throughout the podcast episode too, but let's go through some of these accomplishments. So, and I think here on your Instagram page, you have it written down perfectly. So let's go through this. So you have like a pinned photo of you with jobs on one end, and on the other end it says, who am I? Or who am I? And the point you're saying there is maybe the jobs don't make who you are makes the jobs. And I think that's a good point, but I'm going to go over the jobs here. So first, it says Canadian Armed Forces in the Army, which is an understatement, the biggest understatement that's ever been said. So you have an extensive Canadian career in the armed forces, a retired Army Reconnaissance Sniper, Joint Task Force 2, and that's tier 1. And for people in America, my American audience, essentially that's the top of the line SEAL Team 6 type stuff is the equivalent, I guess. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And so extremely high end military stuff. And then also Pathfinder in the military. You're also a podcaster now, like you said, and you were telling me this kind of before I pushed record here. You've done, depending on whether you count it as interviewing somebody or doing a full on like podcast episode or doing a live chat, you're somewhere around 1,000 episodes deep in there. So police use of force instructor, computer systems engineer instructor. So just to be a computer systems engineer takes a lot of years of education and experience, but then to become an instructor is something else. You're an author as well. So let's just throw that in there. You're an author. How many books? One book.
The computer system engineering book was about 700 pages long, and I'm currently writing another book as we speak. It's got several chapters done already. I'm co-writing it with another individual called Seb Lavoie, and we'll see where that goes.
Okay, so author of essentially a computer engineer's textbook or manual. Then you have international security consultant. Just for funsies, you're a coffee shop owner. Let's throw that in there. And then ultra endurance racer. I laugh at the coffee shop owner because it seems unconnected, except for what I'm going to say here in a moment. Let's see. Yeah, ultra endurance racer. Again, understatement, if there's an understatement. You're not just an ultra endurance racer. You're a 24-hour solo mountain biking champion, world champion.
True.
So yeah. You're also a high performance race coach. So you help other people. And I had already mentioned the podcast, the collective. I love the idea of it. I love the idea of just saying, okay, we're going to take these ideas that are very helpful to the human spirit in terms of overall human wellness, and we're going to bring them all here. And we're going to talk about them, address them, break it down, how that might look like scientifically, how that might look like experientially, and just kind of bring all that together. So I really love that. So yeah, now, like I said, my inferiority, my internal piece in my head is like, this guy, like, he doesn't quite fit the mold in terms of normal people doing extraordinary things. You fit the mold of extraordinary things for sure. But yeah, I don't know, like, are you normal, Shaun? Like, how does somebody in a lifetime do everything that you do and still have a chunk of time left to do more things?
Thanks, man. That's a good opener. And you know, the funny part is that you said that, you know, you might, and you're tongue in cheek when you say you might have a little bit of inferiority complex when you're reading that. But I've got wicked imposter syndrome, man. And so I've done several podcasts on it. We've had a number of guests on our show that we've discussed this subject. And I think I've got like 110% imposter syndrome. And so a lot of the things that I do that drives me is based on the idea that I feel like, you know, I just, not that I'm not good enough. It's not that. I just feel that there's always more to give. There's always more to do. I'm not satisfied with mediocrity. And so I pursue deeper than most. And it's not because I'm anything special, because I've said this. I wish I had $1 for every time I've said it, actually. It's almost become a little bit of a mantra that I used to be a skinny, underperforming kid, you know, 135 pounds before I joined the Army, and I was bullied, and my high school upbringing kind of sucked, and you know, all the usual things that didn't set me up for a amazing path forward. And somehow I managed to cobble together a path that I wouldn't say it's impressive or notable. It's satisfied me. I've found things that make me want to sink my teeth into something and pursue it deeply so that I can learn what I need to learn in the moment.
You breezed through some of that upbringing a little bit and some of those earlier experiences as a kid. Do you feel like any of that, whether it be bullying or other kind of embarrassing moments or failures, feeling small, have you been able to connect that period of time with you to maybe that internal voice that carries you forward now? Or is there any connection there for you?
Yeah, sure. I've given it lots of thought, and I've talked about it in the past with, again, subject matter experts who I think on the collective podcast now we've had several hundred guests, and psychologists, psychiatrists, all the therapists, CEOs, and other tier ones and Olympians, and just a bunch of different people with a bunch of different life experience and knowledge. And so the subject has come up, and not just about my life, my tiny little life, but other people's lives on the guest panels that we've had, and as the conversation goes around, when there's typically high performers at the table. So let's pretend for a moment that there's 4 tier 1 special operations guys sitting at a table having the same conversation to the question that you just asked. Generally speaking, there's commonality on background in the sense of a rough upbringing, like either not, I'm not going to say poverty, but not a lot of money, or a missing dad, or someone who was hard, or whatever the case is. There was something in their childhood trauma or something in their background that helped shape them into the person that they became later in their life. In my case, I was bullied. I had a excuse me. I had a brother, and we were both bullied in high school. And, that kind of running down the back alley, trying to get away from the bullies that are throwing rocks at you every day after school, that kind of nonsense. And I've got big British ears, which you can't see because I've got the headphones on. And so, like, they were big enough that someone would, like, flick them and, call me big ears and all of that good stuff. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. But day after day, it kind of piles up and it kind of sucks. And I didn't know how to fight back then as a kid. And my dad was like, he was in my life, but he wasn't really engaged in my life. So I didn't have a whole lot of options. I was just getting my butt kicked, as was my brother. And it got to a point where he committed suicide because of the bullying. And so, that was when I was in high school. And then shortly after that, I joined the military. And I joined the military with the idea that, and I'd always wanted to go into the military since as long as I could remember. My mom says I was telling people at the age of 5 that I was going to be a soldier, believe it or not. So, flash forward, I joined the military, and I suppose I could have had any kind of a career. I chose the infantry because I felt it was going to be the hardest. And then I was rapidly pursuing the airborne way of life. Basically, I was trying to choose the hardest trajectory in front of me at every single step, which ultimately took me up to Tier 1 Special Operations, which at the end of the day, when you look at it from a more than arm's distance view, on a cold, calculated, non-emotional perspective, really what that job is the anti-bully. And so, bullying was a thing in my childhood that eventually, 13, 14 years later, I was the anti-bully. And so, what shapes us? Do we shape the job, or does the job shape us? As I stated in that pinned comment on my Instagram post that you read out when we first started this podcast, this show, I had to write that down and pin it to my Instagram post because so many people would ask me about my background. How did you do this? How did you do that? How did you get to here? Who are you? And so I just kind of got tired of explaining myself to every single person who would ask me that question day after day after day. I just threw up a tiny little template to suggest generally what my life has looked like, but that doesn't say anything about the person. So your question is on point in the sense of, bullying. What did it do? What does it do to anyone? And so these are kind of the topics that I enjoy talking about for sure.
All right, real quick. So, in the theme of resilience, I have 2 challenges for you, the listener. The first challenge If you find this interview insightful or interesting, you really like the content that is coming in, please like, follow, share, subscribe, all of those things within whatever platform you use. Tell a neighbor, tell a friend, talk to your cat about it. Like, let's get this out there. This show is real tiny, and the interviewees that come on this show and share their insight, their wisdom, it can help a lot of people. So the more that it can get out, the better that it can serve the mission that I'm trying to do, which is to normalize chasing failure. So the second challenge that I have for you is to invest 15 minutes of your time into a timeshare opportunity that I have for you. I'm just kidding. I'm not selling you a timeshare opportunity. But what I am doing is I want you to take 15 minutes of your time and invest that into another episode that I have done. Please help me know. What I'm hoping for is for you to come in the comments section and give me some good feedback. Maybe scrutinize me a little bit. Let me know how I can be better as an interviewer to help this show be more palatable for you. But this isn't all about me. How did you like the guest? What were some of the insights that you got from the guests? Leave that in the comments section as well. This is all good stuff. So within the theme of resilience, those are the two challenges that I have for you. Help me, help you, help the show. Let's get better. Let's keep growing. Thanks, guys.
That's horrifying to hear about your brother. What kind of role did that play? Obviously, it impacted you. It sounds like from a career trajectory to where ultimately you got to this anti-bullying situation or like professional career. At the time, how scary was that? How confusing was it? Like, how was it for your family?
Well, so this would have been like in the very early 80s. And so in 1980, you would have had to spend several days trying to find a book on the subject of suicide. There just wasn't literature out there about it. There wasn't a common framework about it. It wasn't a common conversation. If anyone was ever going to say the word suicide, it was whispered in the shadows out of ears of anyone else that was around. It was kind of like someone would walk around the corner and quietly say it to someone else, and the conversation might last 3 sentences. Because back then, no one talked about it. And so there were no self-help books. There were no conversations. There was no guidance. I just basically had to figure things out myself as I moved forward. And just as my parents had to figure things out, there were no adults talking about the subject in the 80s.
I can't imagine what that would do as a sibling, let alone as a parent. How did that react in terms of your relationship with your father? Did he lean in or did he further detach?
Further detached.
Mm.
And I mean, like, as an example, like, I don't want to throw anybody's parents under the bus. I don't want to throw my own dad under the bus, but I can just speak factually that, as an example, when I was a kid, I was a pretty avid soccer player, and I did a lot of hunting when I was a kid with a 22 cal or fishing or whatever the case is. My dad never attended any of those things. He never saw me play soccer. He was a hardworking guy, for sure. We moved from England when I was 10 years old, and he moved from, I was born in a place called Yorkshire in England, quite a hard upbringing in Yorkshire, coal miner sort of mentality. And so we moved over to Canada so my dad could work in an underground coal mine to get out of England, which at the time was kind of poverty based. And so when we moved to Canada, he worked, and then he'd come home and he'd drink beer, and then he'd work and he'd drink beer, and he'd work and he'd drink beer. And so that's what men did back then. And I'm not saying all men, but I'm saying that was the norm. In the 70s and the 80s, that's what dads did. They didn't pack their kids' lunch for soccer, walk them to the soccer pitch, stand on the sidelines, cheer, and then walk them home. That just wasn't a thing back then. It's become more of a social or cultural norm today, but that wasn't the norm back then. So he was pretty absent in my life, but then, of course, when the incident occurred, he was more absent in my life. So basically, what I'd been doing since, kind of the age of 12, like I said, I I'd grab my 22 caliber and I'd go out and hunt squirrels or rabbits or goony birds. And I'd grab my 22, head out in the morning and come back at night. And I'd be out in the bush, the Canadian bush, hard Canadian bush, for 8, 10, 12 hours, whatever. There's no GPS back then. There's no little radios that you got to call home and say, I'm okay. I'd go out with a pack of matches, an apple and a can of baked beans, one or the other. And that would be my chow. I'd start a little fire, heat up my apple. I'd be good to go. And then I'd, however many rabbits or squirrels I'd grab, I'd bring them back to my buddy's cats and wash and repeat. And so I spent a lot of time in the bush. I spent a lot of time by myself. And back then, like these moments where I'd be by myself, it's not like I was getting my zen on. I wasn't like Miyamoto Masashiing anything. I didn't know, no one taught anybody anything about reflection or self-improvement or self-development or how you can become a better person when you're sitting on a log by yourself in the silence of the forest. I just didn't know these things. I was just naturally drawn to these things. And so it's only been, decades later that I realized the power of what I was doing. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing at the time.
Yeah, to go to that scenario where you laid out, you and 4 other hard chargers, whether it be whatever their field of expertise is in, hard chargers nonetheless, and they're sitting there and they all have this kind of common thread of a hard upbringing or something challenging within the upbringing. There's also a common thread of like that voice in your head continuing to stick with you, and for me, my experience has been, and I've seen this experience happen with other people, has been that voice kind of begins to shift from maybe sounding like a bully to sounding more like a really important accountability buddy. Like it's almost like this, like sometimes the voice turns into more of a bully voice, but for the most part, the voice is like, no, you're off. Like here's where you're missing the mark, go this direction. Like inevitably that voice seems to be right when I listen to it. But yeah, I've noticed that internal voice, that internal, whatever you want to call it, maybe it's like a recalibration system or something. And sometimes it can come off harsher than others, depending on how well you're following through in partnership with this voice. But that voice seems to exist nonetheless. Like you said, the imposter syndrome aspect that you have going on.
Yeah, and I in case there's, I guess, semantics or definitions might be important in this case. The idea that imposter syndrome to me is different than intuition, the voice. And so the imposter syndrome is a feeling that whatever I've done isn't a big deal, we'll call it. And so, the moment that you get a little medal hung around your neck and you're champion of the world or whatever, champion of the international intergalactic sphere of awesomeness, if you win that position, whatever, like I have zero interest in the moment. I'm already thinking what's next. Because the moment, even though it's a culmination of perhaps months or years of effort to get to that point, to execute on that day, to then get the outcome, whatever the outcome is almost an aside to the journey towards the outcome, which is where my head is at. I love the grind. I love the lessons on the way to the outcome. And so, the imposter syndrome will have me thinking, okay, that's cool, but what's next? And that is different than intuition, which to me is something that is many things all piled together into this big soup bowl called intuition, that is part subconscious, part conscious, part pattern recognition, part, we'll call it the universal messaging. It's a lot of things to many people. But for me, the imposter syndrome is something that I can use as a lever or as a scalpel to shape my path forward. But intuition is not a tool or a lever that I use as such. It is a voice that isn't a tool. It is a message that I can either accept or ignore, but it doesn't fuel me, if that makes sense.
Mm. And so the lever you're pulling with the imposter syndrome is basically turning it to fuel
That's right.
for the next endeavor or the next goal or whatever.
That's right. Yeah. And
Okay.
you know, like the imposter syndrome, and maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but there's people who are big deal people who've done some incredible things that have imposter syndrome worse than I do. And I think I've got it the worst, but they've got it even more worser. And so they have found a way to shape their imposter syndrome, just as I have, and so it becomes it's almost a placeholder or like a bookmark for the conversation of, look, we've all got things, we've all got positives and negatives, we've all got limitations, for lack of a better term, and it's our job, your job, to figure out how to take that thing and wield it like a tool, wield it for more, wield it for betterment. And so no matter what's holding you back, the quote unquote negative thing that a person is struggling with, there's a way to use that to shape your near future so that you start producing positive outcomes. But the only way that anyone will ever understand that is to start the play. You've got to play. You've got to adventure. You've got to be bold enough to take the negative and try to shape it into a positive. And that takes a bit of time, and it takes a little bit of guts, but it always produces a better understanding of our trajectory in life.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. The thing I was going to say about all the jobs that you've had, what seems to be the commonality, at least with most of them, I would have to look at over all of them to see if it fits for all of them. But it seems like most of them, the common thread in between them is service.
Yeah.
Like
You're correct.
everything from the coffee shop worker to, I'm not sure if engineering in of itself is of service, but teaching engineering is. And then all of the military stuff is all of service. So yeah, and then even, coaching. So maybe the going on a 24-hour solo mountain bike race isn't necessarily of service, but the teaching of it or coaching others on how to do it, that is. And then there might be times, I don't know, like I do ultra running, and there's definitely opportunities, especially if you're on a looped course, for acts of service on that when somebody else is suffering. And then you lean into that suffering with them and just start talking to them, and all of a sudden your suffering goes away and their suffering goes away. But yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. So what is it for you that seems to be this underlying theme of your compass and whatever that goal is that you're chasing, in conjunction with, like you said, the imposter syndrome, the fuel that you're using from the imposter syndrome? What is it about service that is the underlying theme? And was that on accident? Was that on purpose?
Mm. I don't know.
Mm.
And so when I joined the military, I didn't know I was a service-driven guy. And by the way, I still don't know if I was or not. I don't know whether I always was or whether the Army made me it. Don't know. And I suppose I could spend the rest of my life considering that, and at the end of that full consideration, it wouldn't change anything, because I am who I am now. I mean, I'm service driven, and so all of my careers have been that way. And I think that it's not something that I realized every year after year. It's only upon reflection, and that's a recent reflection I'm talking about over the last couple of years. Basically, when I scribbled down my list of the careers that I've been engaged in, I patternized it as such. Wow, I guess I've been service driven. That was my thought. But that is a relatively new thought. So it's not like when I was 27, I decided, hey, I think I'm service driven. I'm going to now focus the rest of my life serving. I didn't think that. I was just naturally inclined to it, and there it was. And so, you mentioned ultra endurance racing can be a little service driven, but not so much. It's more of generally speaking, it's a solo sport, and you're there to learn things about yourself, et cetera. However, of course, when I was a high performance race coach, which I did for 15 years, I coached athletes all around the world, predominantly ultra endurance racers, but anything on dirt or road, to include stage races and criteriums and anything on two wheels. Basically, I coached with a more of a focus on ultra endurance. When I'd be racing 24s, sometimes I would race them for me, where I wanted to see what Shaun was capable of in totality, fully optimized. But then other races I would race, and I would start off on the start line with a completely inappropriate strategy for surviving a 24-hour solo race. But it was my job as a coach, or at least as I saw it, after I'd done, 15 or 20 24-hour solos. It's not that I didn't have things to learn. It's just that I'd learned enough that then I could start moving around in the playground called 24-hour solos to try to break the mold, to try to do things wrong in order to learn how to do things right. And so, out there on the 24 solo as a competitor, on a course that would have several of my athletes on it as well, sometimes I'd go off the start line like it was only a 6-hour race to see if I could push it all the way out through to a 24-hour race and still get a win through a reverse strategy kind of thing. And so my job, as I saw it in some races, was to serve my athletes by not serving myself, by actually trying to break myself in a new way to try to learn more about the model that I was playing in.
How did that serve you then? Doing that, because there's a really well done study that shows most people at the end of a race finish stronger than they started because they held back, essentially, right? Like they had more in the tank and they conserved too much. And so, and I find that to be true for myself, right? So for you, kind of doing the opposite, like let's do this in a 6-hour strategy instead of a 24-hour strategy. Like, did that bring you some new insight into this is actually something that I can do? Or did it break you off and you're like, never again?
Yeah. So I typically do parallel processing. And so one was about me, but one was about my fellow man or my teammates or the athletes that I was coaching. And so I need to push my limits to the breaking point so I can understand the extreme of the left and right of arc of my battle space. But for my athletes, as I'm learning within that battle space, I'm exposing myself to things that they've never imagined or they would never do, or that's ridiculous, Shaun. Why did you do that? So that I can learn for you, so that you don't have to go through what I just put myself through. So that if you do decide you want to put yourself through what I just put myself through, at least we've got some safety bumpers to bump up against, where my tolerance for risk is probably more than most. And so I know I can push myself further than most. And therefore, I typically bump into the sharp edges and get the scar from it before someone else will. And so it was my job, as I saw it, to also talk about those scar moments to help them out. I want to add this, that in my training, as I would prepare for 24 hours, sometimes I would go out and do a 6-hour ride, like on no water and no food, just to see what can be done. What Shaun can do, but also more importantly, if I look you in the eye and say, dude, big deal, you dropped your water bottle in hour 3 and you kept running, but you wish you would have picked up your water bottle, but you didn't. Get it out of your head. It's not a big deal. You can go for several hours without water. You can go for several days without food. All of these things are possible by me. And therefore, if I can do it, you can do it because I'm not that special. The only perhaps special thing about me is I'm quite stubborn, and I've really pushed myself in a lot of ways to the left and right of arc so that I understand what humans are capable of more than most people are capable or understand what is capable. Therefore, I feel that one of my responsibilities to some degree whenever I'm talking with someone is to help them understand that you just don't know what you're capable of because you just haven't explored it fully enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely true for most people. For when I say most, I mean like almost everybody. So, having said that, you made it clear you're not going to talk about specifics within military operations and things that you did. And I definitely respect that. So I have two questions that want to kind of bounce off of that. I guess I'm going to hold off on one of them, but so I still have two questions. Okay. So what's harder? The ultra endurance stuff that you're doing or the high intensity training and kind of being belittled and being torn down to be built back up training that you like hardest training that you experienced in the military? Like which one, like, do they even compute?
So, it's a great question. Let me try to frame it up in this way. So, this shirt that I'm wearing right now, the Pathfinder sweatshirt, is a course in the military, the Canadian military. And there's a Pathfinder course down in the US military as well, but they're radically different. The Pathfinder course down in the US is quite short and quite limited in its scope as compared to the course up here in Canada. They share the same title, but they are apples and oranges. So this course was 70 days long, and there were no days off. It was back-to-back days for 70 days nonstop. Every day, we typically got about 3-ish hours of sleep for 70 days. So you can imagine we were quite sleep deprived at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
We were generally getting about one meal per day, sometimes two. And by one meal, I mean one MRE or one IMP meal.
Mm-hmm.
And the weights on our backs, the rucksacks, this is not counting weaponry and all of, assault vests and all that good stuff. The pack itself was typically always in excess of 100 pounds. And so a lot of our stuff that we did was a lot of movement in pitch black or in the heat of day, whatever the case is. But it was a lot of hard grind with no end in sight. And you basically had to compartmentalize things minute by minute sometimes in order to just survive. So 70 days in a row under really tough conditions, you learn a thing or two about yourself. Now, using that as the model of a fairly rigorous training cycle, move it over to 24-hour solo mountain bike racing, which is arduous because unlike a huge pack on my back and going through the pitch black and all of that good stuff, you're on a saddle now. But I would say that 24-hour solo or ultra endurance racing, and I don't consider ultra endurance racing to be ultra until it's 12 hours plus. And so at the 12-hour plus mark, that's when things become interesting for human physiology, psychology, and emotional state. And so unlike this Pathfinder course, you kind of get in a certain rhythm. You get your groove, day 12, day 27, day 60. You know what you're in for. You know that every minute is frickin' hard, but you found your rhythm. 24-hour solo racing or ultra endurance racing, you never actually get a rhythm. You've just got the problem. And the problem doesn't really reduce its intensity over the extent of the race. It's not like halfway through, let's pretend it's a 12-hour race. It's not like 6 hours in, You think, oh, I've got my rhythm. The rest is super duper easy now. 12 hours is hard when it's only 12 hours because every single minute is focused on maximum effort. We'll call it trying to win or at least achieve the outcome that represents the totality of the preparation leading up to the event so that you feel satisfied with your performance. And so I consider them as two quite different things. In a 24-hour mountain bike race, your arse comes off the saddle for sometimes only 7, 8, 10 minutes total in that 24-hour period. And that's usually to throw on different layers or put on your night light system or whatever the case is. But when you're out there turning laps in the dark, like you're constantly turning. On a course like this, sometimes you just go down on one knee in the pitch black and scan your arcs and listen for, but you're getting a little break, even though you got the huge weight, you got all the command responsibilities, you got lots of things on the go, but at least you get to pause every once in a while. But on a bike, there's no pausing. There's no respite. And so a lot of people aren't used to not getting respite over the totality of a 24-hour period. Now, 24 hours of no respite is sometimes the equivalent of like a week for a regular person living. And let me make the example. So the amount of calories that I burn racing 24 hours nonstop is almost the equivalent of a week's worth of food. And so that's where I draw the comparisons is I'll be out there for a full 24 hours living a week of life, and it will be challenging, but some people will live a full week of their life and not be challenged because they're not really moving their needle in life. And so it's hard to explain which one is more difficult to compare this Pathfinder course to a 24-hour solo or an ultra endurance race, because they're two different timelines with two different mission sets, with two different outcome-driven, purposeful staying in the program of a race or a course like this. There's a lot of variables that are involved and a lot of complexity to all be distilled down to this, the why of the moment. And so if you don't have a strong why to complete a 70-day long course, guess what? You quit on day one. If you don't have a strong why when you stand on the start line of a 24 solo, guess what? You quit on hour one. And that's the way it is. So the comparison to your question, the comparison is, for me, less about the extent of the timeline or the intensity of the timeline. It's more about what the person thinks they are and where they are and why they are there.
I heard Chad Wright. I don't know if you're aware of Chad Wright in the U.S. He's a Navy SEAL, or
Is that the guy who does all the yelling?
yeah,
Yeah.
he does the yelling.
Yeah.
And he did not this year, but the year prior, last year, he did Cocodona 250, and he was comparing it to Buds or Hell Week. And he said he thought that Cocodona 250, which is 250 miles, ran in Cocodona, Arizona, so through the mountains and the heat and all the extremes and stuff. He said he thought the race itself was physically harder than Hell Week, but in terms of the rest of Buds being the mental sort of game, he's like, there's no comparison because there's a lot of that doesn't quite correlate. But in terms of the physicality of it, he thought the run was harder in his experience. So I thought that was unique. But
I'd like to say that to compare as you just did, how he compared that, it very much depends on the individual. And so the first 48-hour solo mountain bike race in the world was held just outside of Houston. And I was one of the racers in that. Ended up placing second against a guy called Dave Hasse, who is an American and frickin' large and in charger. And I love losing to a guy like that because he knows what's up. He's worked like a dog. I think I slept 4 hours in the 48. He slept a little bit less, and good on him. And so, what did he learn? What did I learn? What would Chad have learned in that moment? Everyone learns what they need to learn as long as they stay in the game of the learning. And so it's easy to go out on a big long event and just tell yourself like, this is the hardest thing in the world. I'm not the hardest dude in the world, and I'm doing the hardest stuff. Yeah, it's cool narrative. But there's always something harder for various reasons at various times in our life. And so, for the guy who thinks that a long run is the hardest thing that they've ever done, perhaps they've never had to sit down and counsel someone for a full day who's really in the hurt locker. And if they're not equipped to do that counseling, now this is the hardest thing that they've ever done. And so you might be a physical specimen that can shut down the mindscape and just kind of grind it out for a day or two or whatever the case is. And now, quote unquote, that's the hardest thing you've ever done. But I disagree, because the hardest thing that a person might have ever done is read a frickin' book from start to finish without jumping on Instagram or jumping on Facebook. And so we all have our blind spots. We all have our areas where it's extremely challenging for us. And so sometimes the guys out there or the girls out there who look like they are best in class, or they're leading the way, or they're the man, more often than not, they've got huge gaping holes in their life where they are the weakest of men, but they focus on the areas that they're really good at, and they never leave that genre. They stay in the game of the game that they're good at, rather than challenging themselves to get into something that they are absolutely terrible at. And that's why I always encourage everyone to, whatever, man, you did what in the past? Big deal. Impress me today by tying on a white belt in something new. And it doesn't have to be a martial art. It just has to be something new that you suck at. You want to impress me? Start sucking for a while and then get good, and then come and talk to me. Now I'm impressed.
Yeah. It's such a good point. So there's different, like the term that, and the model that I use with my clients is called window of tolerance. But essentially it's a model that helps teach how a human being builds resilience in a particular domain. So like, it could be running, it could be jujitsu, tying on the white belt. It could be, going back to school, going to college. It could be whatever it is, whatever the domain is. But you're right. We have domains in which we've either built up habitually, or that we naturally excel in, or whatever. But there's areas where we have giftings in, or we've already worked on and built up a particular resilience toward. But that means we have other areas to continue to grow in.
I've got two great examples for you. One is martial arts based, and one is cycling based. And I could give you lots of other, but this will do for now. So martial arts is an example. I've been doing it for over 40 years. I'm 60 years old now. And when I turned 52, the week of my 52nd birthday, I looked to my wife and said, I'm going to go start BJJ, going to tie on another white belt. And I headed down, stepped onto the BJJ mats, never done BJJ before. I'd done judo and all kinds of other stuff, but I'd never, ever done BJJ. And it was great, but I got my arse whooped. And so, why would a dude at 52, who's at that point had, 32 years of martial arts, who quote unquote had a reputation for being able to take care of business, etc., why would I expose myself to BJJ, which exposes me to the reality that we all have blind spots. We aren't what we think we are. We can't kick as much ass that we tell ourselves that we can. And so why would I do that? Because I'm a big fan of tying on a white belt. Within our domain, And so it's our job to find the white belts within the martial arts domain. It's our job to find the white belt moment in the cycling domain. I've been cycling for 25 plus years. And so, again, loads of 24s, lots of competition. I've done hundreds of 4 and 6 and 8 and 12-hour races. So it's not for lack of racing experience. What I look for within the silo of cycling is a new white belt moment. That happened 2 years ago when I switched from half of my 24-hour solos were on single speed hardtails. And so racing for 24 hours nonstop on a single speed is difficult. But eventually you get good at it. And I need to find something else that I'm not good at within the silo. And so 2 years ago, I got a new bike, and it's a bike unlike any I've ever had before. The geometry is radically different. It has a dropper seat, if that means anything out to anyone out there. It's got a motor. It's an electric mountain bike. It has 150 millimeters and 140 millimeter suspension on it, which I've never had before. So it's like a spaceship from the future. And 2 years ago, I started riding this, and I wasn't actually riding it that well because I was literally on a white belt bike moment again. And so now I've been on it 2 seasons, and now I'm riding pretty well on it. And I would say that it's taken me almost 2 years to move from white belt up to a blue belt on this bike. But I'm a black belt in cycling. I'm a black belt in 24-hour solo or ultra endurance racing. I know my abilities on a bike, but I'm always looking for ways to challenge myself. I'm not satisfied with being good at something. It satisfies me to find my mediocrity at something and then improve upon that.
Going off of that, whether it could be a particular area in the military, it could be Pathfinder school, it could be mountain biking experience, any experience. What would be the experience that comes to mind where you found failure? Like you sought it out and you pushed yourself to the extreme, not finding failure because you just quit and avoided, but found failure because you went after it, you sought it out, and then you caught it.
Well, it's a great question because I've had so many failures in my life. And so let me take you back to my regular Army days before I went into special operations. 1991, I did my Army Sniper course. And so I'm Army Sniper qualified and I'm Special Operations Sniper qualified, 2 different things. So 91, I did my Army Sniper. And at the time, the sniper course in Canada hadn't been run for a few years. And so the year that it was run was a big deal. And so all the candidates on the course were all senior candidates. We all were highly capable or had strong backgrounds to lead towards potential success on the course. But the course was notorious for failure rate. Really high standards, but challenging enough that it didn't matter who you were going to start failing. And so up until that point, I guess I'd been in the Army at that point 8 years. I was a bit of a natural in the sense of if I put my mind to something and I started working hard on it, I'd usually do quite well in something. I won't say how many courses I topped, but I usually did really well. We'll leave it at that. I found my way to success. I found my way to the podium in pretty much everything I did. And I'd work hard, but it would come naturally to me. And I wouldn't face that many failures. But the Army Sniper course was the first thing I bumped into where I was failing things every day, failing things several times a day. And it was the first time in my life, probably, where I was looking at so many stacked up failures that I was starting to question my abilities, where I was wondering if I would actually be successful in this thing. And so my Army Sniper course taught me not only, let me back up for a sec. As part of that program, no one holds your hand. No one would sit you down. Again, this is the early 90s. There was no, come on into my office, let's have a hug. Let's talk about what went wrong. Let's talk about how you're going to do better tomorrow. There was none of that. You either made it or you didn't, and you made it on your own abilities to drive through the problem. So in that course, I had to learn a lot about how to figure out failure and manage it on the daily, unlike I'd ever had to do before. And so it was a condensed period of working through the problems, understanding how I work in those problems. And then by the end of it, I was actually intrigued by failure. And so from that course forward, I started pursuing failure rather than pursuing success. And I've said that many times in many podcasts now, and sometimes people don't understand what I mean by pursuing failure. It doesn't mean that when I wake up in the morning, I go looking for failures. What I do is I'll look for a problem that I might not be able to solve, but I'm going to get after it. And the failure or pass or this or that is neither here nor there to me. What is important is I engage in things that are difficult, that have a chance for failure. And if I fail, big deal. That's the win. And if I win, big deal. I'll look for another failure. And so failure is where it's at, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the people who know me that are watching this right now probably just looked at my face and saw me get giddy. I don't know if I might have blushed by what you said, but because one of the mottos that I say with my clients, and I've said on this show several times, is chasing failure, right? Just for exactly the same thing that you just said is, I think our egos get so trapped in failure that we are more likely to avoid than pursue. And so if you can normalize the challenge of failure as being something that ought to be done because it's the only way for you to grow and get better at something, then you can begin to embrace the challenge of you getting to that ultimate whatever it is. So let's say next month I have 100-miler coming up, and like I could just not train until the 100-miler. It's going to be a terrible experience, and I'm going to probably fail, and I'm going to feel terrible about the failure because I know I didn't, like, showing up to the starting line maybe is a win, but like I didn't put in the best effort to be as successful as possible. And so that's not chasing failure. That's like just letting failure happen.
That's right.
Yeah. But chasing failure is putting in your best effort to get there, arrive to the starting lineup at your best that you can be in that moment, and then try to do your best in that moment. And then whether you fall short or whether you don't meet the time standard that you had set out for yourself or whatever it is, like the failure, the things that you learn in the experience to that failure is so overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. Like, and that's when you begin to be like, oh, like, wow. And then you can start to pick apart the little things of, okay, here's how I could have done better. And you can have some fun with that. Right. But yeah, chasing failure, I think, is a must. Or as you put it, pursuing failure,
Yeah. And, so it's not just, it's not a one-dimensional equation. It's not just like a simple algorithm that says, pursue failure, you'll be a winner eventually. That isn't the equation. I do love pursuing failure, but I pursue failure with an eye towards a much richer equation, and that is eventually I'm going to win. Like, that is the outcome of the equation. The equation isn't I'm going to pursue failure and the win is eternally failing. I do like to pursue winning. And so let me give you a lame example that should make the point on how I run my life. And so a few days ago, went out for a ride with my wife, and we're up at a place called, I call it the Tree of Suffering. Over the last 6 years or so, every time I go past this tree, which is nearly every single day. Whether it's winter or not, I do 22 push-ups up it. I put my feet up, get in a knuckle push-up position, and I crack them out. I've been doing that. I don't even know how many thousands of times I've done that. Anyway, we're up at the Tree of Suffering, and there's another log there, and I jumped up on it and I said, hey, let's just do a little yoga off. Now, my wife is good at yoga. She's good at a lot of things. And she gets up there in her one-legged position, and I guess it's some sort of sun salutation. I don't know. I'm not a yoga guy. But she adopted her position, and I thought, oh boy, I'm in trouble. And I jumped up next to her, and I thought, I'm just going to go with the old psychological warfare. So I started flashing hands in front of her face to try to get her all off balance. And I put myself off balance and fell off the log. I was like, I lasted 15 seconds, man. That sucks. Mm-hmm. But my wife just beat me. I threw the video up on my Instagram stories so that everyone could understand that, like, I don't mind losing, man. I don't mind losing. And I don't mind if people see me lose, but never get it twisted. I'm still going to come back at you. So yesterday I put up a little thing on my Instagram feed, and it shows me doing like little one-legged stances with a little bit of kujikiri ninjutsu stuff, and just to have a little bit of fun with the internet. But anyone who knows me knows that yesterday I started my campaign to win the one-legged standoff challenge, which doesn't exist formally at the moment, except in my head as of yesterday. And so I don't care how long it takes, 1 year, 2 years, doesn't matter. My campaign has started, and eventually I'll get to a point where in my head, at the very least, I'll be close to setting a world record, or at least I know I can go against the top 0.1% of the planet. That's how I run my program, man. That's how I run my head.
Okay, so intense one-legged standoffs in the near future for you.
That's right.
I'll be watching these on your Instagram.
But I'll be doing it as I do. I these kind of things. A lot of that stuff happens in the shadows. So I've thrown it out. People who know what's up, people who know me, will know that once I've started my campaign, they know what it's going to look like. It'll look like this. You won't see a lot of it, but I'll be practicing on the regular. I'll be up on that log every day doing my thing, building out my time until eventually 6 months, 12 months, 27 months from now, it'll be like, you want to do a little one-legged standoff? Let's see where that goes, you know?
Well, now you've just put it out there. So maybe there's somebody else that's going to be training along with you on the side.
Already. It's already started.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. That's hilarious.
If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind building up that for a sec, which is what you just said. The idea that, you know, maybe someone else will be picking up what I'm putting down. Well, people do. And so where's the harm in this? I like to do life the way I like to do it. And now I've got this one-legged stork stance challenge that's in my head as of yesterday. And already people are picking up what I'm putting down. And so now they're involved in it. Where's the harm? I'm not an influencer. I'm just an inspirer. And I'm not actively out there calling myself an inspirer, but people say that some of the things I do are inspiring, much like some of the things they do are inspiring to me. And so social media for me is a great way to be inspired and a great way to inspire others. That's how I use social media. I don't use it to focus on divisive issues. I use social media as a positive tool in my life to keep me engaged in ways that are fun for me, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so let's see. Okay. Well, you said it's not a divisive issue. So now I'm like hesitant to ask you this next question.
You're fine. You're fine.
And if it feels divisive, then feel free not to just tell me I'm being divisive. But so you had said, like I mentioned a couple of times on here, you didn't want to go into specifics within your military career, maybe operations and things. How do you feel about people that are doing that, whether it be some sort of special forces operations individual going out there, and whether it be for political gain, financial gain, social gain, whatever, putting out there the things that they've done in combat in order to gain influence in one way or another. How do you experience that, being somebody who's pretty rigid about, I'm not talking about that stuff, period? So how is that for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think anyone's ever asked me it quite that way. And it's a good question, man. I like the way you framed it. So I'll say this, that on our podcast, The Collective, there's 4 rules. And I designed them. First one is no race. Second is no religion. Third one is no politics. And the fourth one is no swearing. And the thing about swearing, it's difficult for guys like me because in my head, I've got all the swear words constantly running because it's fun to swear, especially with other guys who swear really well when you're on special operations. Swearing is fun. But I try to keep it out of my life externally. I try not to verbalize it too much because it's sloppy thinking. It is, it's not articulate thinking. It is not intellectual at all. It's a crutch. I do love swear words, but it's a crutch. And so those 4 rules are there for a reason, because race, religion, politics takes away from the conversation at hand, which is much richer, whatever the subject is. Those things tend to dilute the conversation or externalize it in a way that isn't appropriate to the topic at hand. And so for me, I try to remain quite neutral on these kind of things. I don't use my military career or any of my careers to make bold political statements or social statements unless they're personal observations that I state as such, but I never generalize and say, don't vote for this guy, vote for that guy. Don't buy this, buy that. I'm not over here selling anything. When I started podcasting, this is kind of important, perhaps, to your question. When I started podcasting, it was reluctantly. I didn't want to. And it would have been about 2 years ago that I was coaching. I had my own coaching company for 15 years. I started it myself. I owned it myself. I loved my job. And then some of my friends from back in my Army days started hitting me up and saying, hey, man, are you aware of the mental health struggles out there in the military? Are you aware of the suicide statistics in the military? Do you know what's going on with first responders and law enforcement? And my answers were always, no, I don't. I'm not in that game anymore. I'm busy. I'm over here doing my thing. I haven't been in that game for a long time. I've been forging my path ahead, almost not quite with blinders on, but basically looking to the future and smashing freaking hard on the future. And so I'm not really aware. And so I was getting these lines of questioning on a pretty regular basis until some key people hit me up on a weekend and said, man, don't do anything this weekend other than look at this problem. Please do me a favor. Take a look at it. And I said, okay, I will. And so I started looking at it over the weekend. And, once you see that, for me anyway, once you see that stuff, you can't unsee it. Once you see how bad the statistics are, you can't scrub the stats out of your head. I just couldn't. And so that weekend decided that's it. I'm giving away my company. I'm going to enter into a brand spanking new trajectory that I am hating on the idea of, but I'll figure it out and I'll smash. And so I didn't want to get in front of a microphone. I didn't want to get in front of a camera. I had a private life that I was quite enjoying that didn't expose me to the world. And so the last 2 years, certainly the last year and a half of hardcore podcasting, have been extremely uncomfortable for me. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I've equivalized it to kind of like as difficult as tier 1 for me. It's been a difficult path to become a podcaster, something that I didn't want to do, something that nearly every day I don't want to do, but the overarching mission being that I was asked to help. And so now I'm trying to help. And that's about as far as I take it in respect to challenging aspects of podcasting or talking about some of the things that the questions that you've asked. I address these kind of things not because I want anyone to know anything about me, because I didn't, and I still don't. I only speak openly about things because I have faith that it will either inspire others to address some of their issues, or it will have someone else think about reaching out to a friend or me, or creating a framework in a podcast with the guests that I would have wanted to talk to when I was a young buck, bringing in these subject matter experts and having these conversations that I still appreciate today, that we had just last week, that hopefully the guests can gain from, but in a role that I never wanted. And so, to your point, I'm not that guy that is looking to create a public avatar in order to sell a t-shirt, to sell a hat, to sell a book, to sell a car, to sell a supplement. That is not me. It's the furthest thing from it. But it's a tricky balance. Social media is difficult, I find. I was never on Facebook. I was never like a social media guy. So over the last almost 2 years, I've literally had to learn a brand spanking new language. I mean, when I started, I only exist on Instagram. When I started, I didn't even know you're supposed to like other people's stuff. I didn't know you're supposed to like repost. I was on Instagram for almost a year before I realized that what stories were. I mean, I didn't even know what stories were. And so it's been quite a journey to try to figure out social media. But all along the way, I've been trying to figure it out like kind of selflessly rather than try to figure it out to sell a car, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go into that conversation. If you're willing to, the you know, frontline, or first line responders, service members, and suicidality. You said the moment you became aware, you can't unknow this stuff, and now you're accountable for what you know. So maybe this is fair warning for those who are listening and don't want to be aware of the problem. Then you can tune out now and come back in about 5 minutes, or maybe more. But yeah, let's talk about that. You have now, after 2 years of spending time and investigating this, talking to experts about it, and learning about it. I mean, the general sentiment would be like, oh, we know it happens. Like soldiers, don't have a purpose, and then they kill themselves, and that kind of stuff happens. Mental health happens. So, let's help kind of bring clarity to the problem. And I think there's nobody better to do that with than you.
Well, as you were speaking, I realized that by coincidence, this is not planned at all. My social media life is never planned. It's all a lot of coincidence. Got a book here, sorry. And it's Setting the Sights on Stigma by a guy called Mark Bouchard. And Mark sent me this book. Thank you, Mark. And he has a standing offer that Mark is currently serving special, or you'd call them SWAT down in the U.S., Emergency Response Team, police, our National Police Service. He's a great guy. Spoken to him several times. He's been on our podcast, and his book is fantastic. So what have I learned? I would say that I've learned a lot, but every day I learn that I don't know enough. And so this is my second time that I'm reading Mark's book. And sometimes I take photos of it in the morning, and I'll yellow highlight something, and I'll put it up on my Instagram stories to encourage other people to think outside of their box, as I try to do every day, think outside of the box of this problem. And I guess what I've learned along the way is that it is far more complex and far more broader reaching than I understood. Initially, for the first few months, as I looked at the statistics, there were no real names or faces to it. But now in the last 2 years, I've met a lot of people who have personally told me quietly that they're struggling, or that I'm considering this or I'm considering that. And these things aren't good considerations. And so not only have I had to get up to speed on what is actually going on out there, I've had to get up to speed on what my responses are in the moment to these various individuals, because I'm not a therapist. I'm not a trained professional. I'm just a 60-year-old dude who's read a lot, talked to a lot of people, has some opinions and ideas, but I am not formally trained. And so when people hit me up on some of these questions, just like, you've kind of proposed right now, what have I learned? I've learned to try to figure out the moment with the individual. I've tried to tune into them. I've tried to find the harmonious moment between us, the synchronization, the vibe between us, as I adjusted, as they adjusted, as we adjusted together in that moment. That's where I spend most of my time. I don't think too much about statistics anymore. What I do think about is the individual that I'm communicating with in the real time. And I don't try to pigeonhole them into a stat. What I try to do is treat them as a blank slate and see where the conversation goes. And being sensitive enough to humanity that I can help shape things to some degree without overly shaping things in a direction that perhaps I don't understand. So maybe the best way to answer your question is, what have I learned? That I didn't know a lot. What have I learned? That I need to know more. What have I learned? That the best way for me to interact with another human being on these kind of subjects is to interact in the real time and figure it out with them, rather than trying to shape their life with my own little thoughts that aren't harmonious with them.
Mm-hmm. Is there any recommendation that you would have in terms of pursuing a loved one that you're concerned about? Maybe they're currently, they're a firefighter, or they're ex-military or whatever, and a loved one feels concerned about them because maybe they're noticing they're drinking too much, or they're isolating, or something like that.
Well, I'll give you an example from this morning. So, and this, I get these every day, but this morning it was a question almost precisely as you just stated it. And so my response was quite simple, because I don't know the details. I don't know the individuals. I don't know the background. I don't know the complexity of the moment. But what I did say is, do they know their why? What is their sense of purpose right now? Why are they sticking around, or why don't they want to stick around? Let's get a sense of, I want to stay rather than I want to go. And so the sense of why are you on the planet? Why do you exist? Why are you going to do what you're going to do, so that 2 years from now, you're still the same human being or different? And so the why of the moment is typically what so few think about. My standard spiel is this: when I get hit with from typically young men who say, hey, how do I become you? How do I get in that career? How do that trajectory? I want to be ... I generally say this: okay, listen, what's your why right now? What? Just give me your why in a sentence or in a paragraph. What is it? Well, what do you mean? Okay, good. So here's what you're going to do for me, pal. You're going to grab a blank sheet of paper and a pen. You're going to go sit at your dinner table, and you're not going to get up from that dinner table until you've done the following. First things first, big why at the top of the page, underline it, and start writing why you're on this planet, why you're still breathing, why you exist for mankind. Don't think small, think big. Why are you here? And then once you've got your why, which may take you several hours, and again, don't get up from that table until you got your why. Next thing is how. Put down a few bullet points that the hows are going to get you to your why. Third thing you got to do is set a timeline on how you're going to get to your why. A year, 2 years, 10 years, 27 years, 1 week, that's up to you. But based on your timeline, you've got to then assign the fourth variable, which is the velocity. And so if you want to be the king of the world in a year, your velocity is a 9 out of 10. If you want to be the king of the year in 10 years, your velocity is a 6 out of 10. 27 years from now, it's a 4 out of 10. And so it is the why, the how, then you've got to get your timeline and velocity. Without those four things, you're bumbling around in the dark, as far as I'm concerned. And so there's many ways to do that process. You can change some of the words from velocity to whatever. But at the end of the day, you got to know why you're here. You got to know how you're going to get to that point. You got to know how long it's going to take you. You got to know how hard you're going to work. And those things are rarely answered on a daily basis by anyone.
If a person says, I don't know my purpose,
Which is usually the case.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where do you have a way to work with them from that standpoint?
Sure do. Don't get up from the dinner table until you have your why. Do you know why doesn't often get answered? Is because people can't sit still for 5 minutes. They can't sit at their
Lack of
dinner table
patience,
until they
yeah.
get their answer. They want their why now,
Mhm.
and it doesn't exist that way. Anything, here's a pithy little statement that I feel to be completely relevant to this moment, and I do believe it to be true in life. Anything worth having takes a long time. Anything that comes too easy is not worth my time. If it doesn't come with a sting, I'm not interested. For me, anything of note has consequence, takes a while, and at the end of it, I'll look back and think, wow, that was kind of expensive in the sense of sweat, blood, and tears. But those are the things that matter. Those are the things that count. I've said recently on a podcast, the subject came up about, like if I gave you the keys to a Bugatti, Shaun, would you take them based on the following reasons? And I said, no. If someone tried to give me a car that I didn't feel like I earned, and I'm talking like for me to take a Bugatti key, I'd have had to have worked with that person for a decade and maybe sweated more than they sweated. Because I don't want anything for free. Free has no value to me. Anything that I value has cost. And I don't mean just paying out $10. I'm talking sweat, blood, and tears. And the sweat, blood, and tears statement is just a proxy for psychological, emotional, or physiological cost. Between those three, that trifecta, if I'm burning all three into a perfect little distilled moment of, oh my goodness, this is expensive. Well, I'm going to remember that moment and I'm going to cherish it for the lessons that it teaches me in the future.
Yeah, it makes me think about that quote, something to the effect of don't feel entitled to anything you haven't either sweat or suffered for, I think is the quote. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So have patience, sit there until you find the why. It's going to come up. Be patient, work with it. Maybe before you sit at the dinner table, my advice would be grab a glass of water
100%.
and be willing to sit there for hours on end.
Yeah, and
Okay,
you know
that's
what?
good.
And this is true. What I'm about to say next. I've said this in the past that it's not just grab a glass of water as you sit down at the table, but I've said grab a glass of water with some electrolytes in it, and here's why. Because as you're writing your why, maybe you'll just have a little cry. And it's good to get rehydrated if you've cried too much. So make sure you get some freaking electrolytes.
Yeah. That's something not a lot of people are selling electrolytes for, is for the tears that you're going to go through while you're finding your why. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So you've been a hard charger the majority of your life. You had struggles and bullying and a tragedy from your brother, the loss of your brother. And then you pursued fiercely challenge and kind of, like you said, was finding things that you can kind of sink your teeth into, that intrigued you, that you can stay consistent with and challenge yourself into. And so essentially being, as you said, now you're in your 60s, being somebody who has been a lifetime hard charger, if you're able to take the wisdom and insight that you have now, what would you share to the 20-year-old version of yourself? Or maybe the 20-year-old out there that's listening, or the 30-year-old or the 40-year-old? One good insight I already got from you was the white belt thing, was just like jumping to it. So if you're a 40-year-old and you haven't tied a white belt around your waist in some domain in the last 10 years because you feel like you've kind of landed and your family's set and your career's set and you haven't tied on a white belt, then tie on a white belt. So that's something that I feel like is very relevant for the maybe 40-year-old. But for the 20-year-old, 30-year-old, what kind of wisdom and insights do you feel like you can share?
Yeah. So, very quickly to touch on the 40-year-old who needs to tie on a white belt, lickety split. That goes for anyone and everyone. And this almost specifically for veterans. The idea that at some point in their youth or in their 20s or 30s, they did something really, really hard and they're really, really proud of it. And they got some amazing outcomes. And now they've got all the things stuck on their corkboard. That was then, this is now. And you cannot live your life on the past. All the crests, all of the trophies, all of the, high school football captain of the year, all these little moments, they're baubles, they're trinkets that you can be proud of, but they're the past. And what's important is the present and the future. Earning a trophy today is far more important than the earned trophy from 15 years ago. Those things are memories. You're responsible to create new memories that are trophy moments. So I just want to make sure that no one's getting that twisted out there. A lot of veterans tend to hang on their past rather than the present. Secondly, for all of the young folks out there that would be, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, I'll just say this, that as I've already stated, before I joined the military, I was a skinny, underperforming kid. I was 135 pounds. And when I was on Tier 1, I was about 165. And so I never thought I'd be in Tier 1 Special Operations. In fact, Tier 1 Special Operations in Canada didn't exist when I joined the military. And that's why I'm referred to as a plank holder, one of the first guys in Tier 1 Special Operations in Canada. The early formation of the team. I was on the earliest formation of the team. And so one day, Tier 1 Special Operations in Canada didn't exist. And then the next day it did. And the moment that it did, I wanted some of that. And so that's generally how I ran my life and how I will continue to run my life. But at one point in my life, I didn't think that way. I started to think that way when I joined the Army. And I started standing next to people who were doing things that I didn't think were possible because I'd never been exposed to it before. In my little mountain town that I grew up in high school, no one was doing anything large and in charge. There was nothing that was, are you kidding me? Did that just happen? That wasn't happening in front of me on the regular basis. But joining the military, certainly by the time I started jumping out of perfectly good airplanes and surrounded by dudes who do that kind of thing in the Canadian Airborne Regiment, as the example, in 2 Commando, people to my left and right were freaks. And I just thought, this is possible? Humans can do these kind of things? I feel that I was limited in my scope of humans are capable of ... But once I started seeing it happen, once I saw someone jump higher than me, and I realized people can jump high, well, now I want some of that action. I want to see what I'm capable of. So I got exposed to the people on my left and right who inspired me to do more, to see what my limits were. So for the young folks out there, my best advice to anyone is find a crew of freaks that will push you beyond the limits that you think are impossible. And so that doesn't have to be in the military. That can be you at home right now, thinking about what white belt you want to tie on for the first time. And that can be like, it could be competitive frisbee golf. It doesn't much matter what it is. You've got to think about what would really impress you. What am I capable of in context of what they are capable of? I want to see what my totality of experience is. At the end of the day, I think if you're lying on your deathbed and you're looking backwards full of regret, that's on you. You blew it. But if you're lying on your deathbed and every moment that you got an opportunity to strip all of those regrets out by just engaging, by sending it, by kicking that ass, you'll have so few regrets on your deathbed. You might be one of the happiest people in the planet that day. A life of regret sucks. A life of non-regret rocks. It's as simple as that. And I think that just like this coffee mug designed to put across this message, do your best or pick up the pace. Do your best is a phrase that I use quite a lot. And it's because it doesn't matter what your problems in life are. Literally, who cares what your problems are? The only thing you should care about is doing your best in the moment. Because it doesn't matter what the outcome is. If you're doing your best, decades from now, when you're on your front porch on the rocking chair, if you've got no regrets because you did your best, you'll be pretty stoked about that. But if you're on your rocking chair and you know you slack-assed it for most of your life and you've got regrets, you can't get rid of those regrets, man, because the regrets are from the past. That's where it's going to sting. You can't change those things. You half-assed it. You know you half-assed it. You're regretful that you half-assed it, and now you can't change it. The only way to change regret is today. Start doing your best. And decades from now, you'll thank me that you did your best every day, because the regret thing, it doesn't really happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, regret's this thing that that can be a good, though motivation is fleeting at times, that can be something that can trigger it. It's just like really envisioning a regretful future, a time where you avoided something, like envisioning the loss. And then you're like, oh, okay, all of a sudden I'm going to get that run in that I was avoiding today or whatever it is.
We all have loads of regrets from our past. We've all got enough regret that we know how it sucks. Mm-hmm. So it's not much of a logical leap to move forward to, if I don't like that, I've got to do something about it. All I got to do is my best and strip out the regret. Presto changeo.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard you say, ambush the ambush.
Yeah.
In terms of preparation, how important is preparation? And is there maybe a practical protocol that somebody can start on to help with preparation?
Okay, so no one's ever asked me that question before, because few people dig that deeply that they would know the reference to ambush the ambush. So good on you doing your homework. I would say this, that if anyone just listened to that question and thought, oh, I can't wait to hear what the answer is, don't worry about the answer. Because either way, it's all good. If you don't ambush the ambush, if you don't plan, if you totally pooch it, if you screw things up that bad, big deal. You're now learning through your massive failure. But let's say you plan it perfectly and nothing goes wrong. You're going to learn how to do it optimally and efficiently. So between those two states, the left and right of arcs, there's something to learn always. And so a person can look at a problem, perfectly design the perfect solution, and perfectly execute against it and they may not learn as much as if they hadn't planned at all. And so, whatever you step into, irrespective of plan or no plan, you've got to treat it like it's a learning opportunity, a learning moment. And so, poor planning typically teaches a person more things. And so, it's not that everyone should actively seek to blow it, to not plan. What a person should do is not sweat the details so much that they're obsessed with constantly planning. Sometimes, as I said it yesterday. In fact, there's a guy who quoted me specifically in his Instagram post yesterday. He's a runner. He's doing 60 kilometers a day for a bunch of days in a row. And I gave him this advice several years ago. And I just told him, hey, man, you know what you need to do? You need to go out and break yourself. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, just start running. Go for a run. And when it starts getting hard, keep running. When you start crying, keep running. And when you want to quit, keep running. And then when you get to the finish line and it sucked, good. Turn around and come back and reflect on it while you're coming back. I think that's the way of the world, man. Like, a lot of people need to go out there and run far enough that they get lost, dehydrated, and vomit from fear. I feel that people need to do that from time to time to understand how much we can push ourselves and how not fragile we are. You know, you go out there and you get a bit lost, you puke on your running shoes and you get a bit discombobulated. As long as you don't die, big deal. There's a lesson in it if you take the time to learn it. And the lesson is different for every single person. But the lesson doesn't exist unless you create the potential for the failure. You create the potential for the outcome. And so planning the perfect plan needs to be done so that you understand one edge of the spectrum. Not having a plan and going out there and getting all kinds of lost in the wilderness is the other end of the spectrum. Both are good so that you can have context.
I really appreciate that answer from a philosophical standpoint, especially. So, how does one get to the former rather than the latter in terms of the edge of the spectrum? What is there a practical way to get to, or tools that they can use, steps that they can use, whatever protocol that they can use to help them get further to that edge of perfect preparation?
Yeah. So, I would say this, that perhaps the best resource that a person can have is a recommended individual or someone. If you've got a friend out there that vets or vouches for a cool coach or a cool mentor, someone who's going to do it right for you. Like, as an example, if I say Kenny, I've got a friend and I think maybe if you talk to him, the two of you will benefit from it. If I say that to someone and if they know me, they're going to pick up what I'm putting down and it's going to be a win for them. But if I hand that out to your neighbor and they don't know me, or it just goes in one ear and out the other, that's their loss. And so what's the win? The win is finding the right person at the right time to say the right thing. The loss is not listening, not doing, not looking. And so I think the best way to an optimal and efficient outcome is to find someone who's been there, done that, made a boatload of mistakes, and can course correct you in a way that isn't too linear, allows enough 5% on either side, so you wend and wind your way down the path imperfectly, but in the imperfection, you learn the lessons that you need to learn along the way. So maybe it's a roundabout answer, but I would say find someone who has been there and done that and can give you really, good advice that is boutique to you, not
Mhm.
a cookie cutter solution.
Yeah. So mentorship for sure. And good mentorship, like
Mhm.
qualified mentorship.
Qualified.
Yeah.
Which is, by the
Okay.
way, it's difficult to find. And that's why I
Mm.
stated, a reference. If I reference someone to a friend, my reference has weight. Whereas someone on the internet that perhaps a person doesn't know who's referencing, go listen to my buddy who just started his coaching company 3 days ago. He just got out of high school. He just did a week-long certification course. You should be good to go. That doesn't have any weight on me. That doesn't have any, that reference weight is zero. And so the internet, as an example, which is a place that a lot of people go to nowadays for help. It's not one-on-one personal handshake stuff. It's virtual nowadays, generally speaking. References are important. And so if I reference someone to a good person, it means something. If some tool on the internet references someone to another tool, it means nothing. So critical thought on who's the right person saying the right thing at the right time, that's where it's all about on the individual. It's your job, the listener, your job to look around or ask around or sniff around to find someone who is legit. And there's so little legit out there nowadays. It's concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. The whatever, the exercise influencer that's
Mhm.
19 and has six-pack abs. It's like you're 19 trying to trying to tell 60-year-olds how to have six-pack abs. Stop it. So, yeah. And that kind of goes into with what we talked about earlier is kind of using some intuition there too, kind of sniffing out. You can suss out a little bit phoniness, maybe not as well as we used to. I don't know, but it seems like there's still some ability to suss out phoniness in people. And so, yeah,
I
that's
think so.
important. Okay, I have more questions, but I think from a time standpoint, Shaun, I think you've been very, very helpful with giving us so much insight and so much of your time. And I mean, I'm honored to have somebody like you with your high caliber of life experience and wisdom to be able to come on here and share some of this. And yeah, is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered or we've missed?
So I would say that much like every podcast that I'm in, I just feel like we're starting to get warmed up and I would go for several
Hmm.
more hours. But I know that that is not a practical, we have practical limitations. So I, first thing, first thought is we can do this again in the future. If your listening audience has any further questions or you come up with any other ideas that you want to jump into, fresh ideas, I'm down for part 2, part 12. I would leave this for the audience that irrespective of what you heard today about my careers or the things that I've done in my life, I'm simply a proxy or a representation of what is possible for anyone out there who's listening. And by, I mean, what is possible, the things that I've accomplished are not that impressive as compared to some of my friends, some of the people that I consider inspirers or people who inspire me. I'm a little flea on the back of a water buffalo, and they're the water buffalo. And so we all have to figure out where we are in life in the levels of the game. And if anyone's listening to this right now and you've had one career and I've had 10 and you were in the Army Reserves and I was tier 1, don't worry about those kind of comparisons. It's not really about that. Life experiences or wisdom comes through a number of silos and how deep you go into each silo and how deeply you think about the world around you. As you get older, you'll start to realize that wisdom is the real currency rather than how many things you've got on your cork board.
Mm-hmm.
The reflection of life, the lessons that you're trying to seek in life for yourself should also be sought for others so that you can pass it along as a service, preferably for free. I'd say that if anyone out there is struggling, find your sense of purpose through a why. And that why, generally speaking, is magnified if your why is to serve others rather than just serve yourself. So try to consider your why as an external understanding to help mankind rather than an internal understanding. Try to help your blind spots. Some of these things are simple little fixes that do your best, serve others, be magnificent. They're easy ways to wake up every morning and be happy with your day, what you produced the day before and what you will produce today. When I woke up this morning, I knew that we had this podcast. And so here's what I thought. Fantastic. I'm going to get to meet another person. I'm going to get to learn from them. I'm going to get to share some conversation with his audience. And hopefully in the future, we'll get a follow-on where I can learn further from their considerations.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shaun. That's great. And I would love to have you on. Like we can we can maybe have a whole episode just on rucking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I would love to have you on again, man. So we'll stay in contact. I really appreciate you. Again, just honored to have you on here. Thank you so much.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slings on Blue Dot Sessions.
The scar tissue woven integrates each imperfection, a familiar face. We wear our struggles, no trace erased. In vulnerability we find our place. Rust is gray, not decay. We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, wings take flight. Within the darkness we find our sight. The Patina'd